Hi, and welcome to CryptoBiography. I'm your host, Brandon Starr, and this is episode 155. It's going to be part 3 of The Island. And here we go. That night, Carden told Gwen all about Care saving the boy and Tristan's talk with him. Gwen was the only other person who really knew the details of what happened with his brother Tristan, so she understood. They didn't talk anymore about Duncan. Carden didn't know what his feelings were on the subject. The next day, Carden went out early to fish. He declined Tristan's request for assistance. The weather was extremely mild, and he asked the boy to help repair the seine net. They normally could fish in the stream with a seine net, but it had been damaged, so they only had the saltwater fish to catch for the time being. The island wasn't terribly large, but when Carden was a youth, his mother Ova had the idea to seed fish from the mainland rivers. They now had trout to eat year-round. Carden went out to sea, pulling the sea net behind him. He could see the length of the island, and behind it the mainland, including the small town where Care had his brush with fate. He wondered if Care would get a big head about it. He hoped not, but he was so young. This would likely be one of his earliest memories when he was older. How would he be different, Carden wondered, if his first memory was of saving another's life? He put the drop net in and waited. He would pull it back in soon. He saw a boat slowly make the turn on the far side of the island, then make its way down. He didn't recognize the boat, but it must have been from the town. He would have recognized any of the boats from the island. They were paddling, he saw, quite close to shore. Then he saw them wave toward shore, though he couldn't see if anyone was waving back. He pulled in the net and took out the captured fish. This was too far from the next market day. These fish would all be dried to keep, except for a particularly fine tuna, which he decided would make dinner. The unknown boat kept coming closer. Carden was in the middle of a second netting when the boat paused in front of their pier, then stopped and pulled in. Carden immediately pulled in the net. It was too early, and there were no fish in it, but he was too distracted by what was happening at his home. As soon as the net was in the boat and secured, he took out the oars and pulled for home. "Ahoy!" someone yelled as he approached his pier. Carden glanced beside him and saw the strangers from the boat standing on his pier waving. 2 of them, an adult and a near-adult boy by the looks of it. He gave a big backward nod to let them know he heard them without releasing his oars. As he pulled in, he tossed up the rope. One of them caught it, but didn't seem to know what to do. Townies, Carden thought. Explains why they had to go all over the island to find my pier. Tristan stepped forward, took the rope from the man who had caught it with a thanks, and tied it down himself. Carden climbed onto the pier and held out a hand to the stranger. "Carden Oversprun," he said. "Greetings." "Hello, Carden Oversprun," the man said. "John Johnson, and my son, John Johnson, Jr. Call him Jack." "John? Jack? Nice to meet you both," Carden replied. "Has Tristan been able to introduce himself?" He looked around. The other kids and Gwen were not in evidence. "Tristan Gwensprun," Tristan offered. He shook Jack's hand. Jack had bright red hair. Carden realized it was the boy from yesterday. "Care helped you yesterday, correct?" "Yes. My son nearly drowned," the man said. He had fair hair, but not red like his son's. He was tall and thin, with a somewhat tight expression. They both wore hats, which is why Carden hadn't seen the boy's bright red hair from his glance on his boat. The boy wore his hat crooked, probably to keep the hat from touching the part of his head that was injured. "We wanted to thank your son properly. May we see him?" "Of course. Tristan, could you go get Care?" Tristan nodded and ran for the house. John watched Tristan go for a moment, then turned to Carden. "So, you're a fisherman?" "Yes. You?" "Farmer. We're at the market to sell and buy. Didn't expect my son to get in such trouble so quickly." "Happens sometimes." "Did you say your name is Oversprun?" "Yes." "Tristan's your boy?" "He is, yes." "But he's a Gwensprun." "Yes, that's how we do things on the island." Carden didn't say more. He knew that most of the people on the mainland took the father's name and thought it strange that they used the mother's, and changed it from generation to generation. Meanwhile, some of the mainlanders had the same surname for centuries. Some of the mainlanders didn't know, or maybe had heard it but hadn't believed in their ways. It was impossible for Carden to tell if John Johnson disapproved or was merely curious. "Here he comes," he said, and nodded in Care's direction. He was running, as young kids usually do, to find out why he was being asked for. But with his game leg, he was running awkwardly. Still, he had enthusiasm, Carden thought with pride. Kier stopped and looked at Carden. Carden said, "Allow me to introduce my son, Kier Gwensbrunn." John Johnson stepped forward and put his hand out to shake. "John Johnson, Kier, and my son Jack, whom you saved yesterday." "Hi," Kier said, shaking the man's hand with a wide smile. He didn't get treated like an adult yet and seemed to be enjoying it. John Johnson looked at Jack, who noticed and said, "Yes, thank you, Kier. I appreciate you saving me." "How is your head?" Kier asked. "Healing," Jack replied. "I have a pretty good-sized bump, though it can't really be seen, just felt, and there's a scab under my hair, too. But it'll all be good soon." "Good to hear," Kier said. "We have something for you," John said. He motioned to Jack, who opened a pack he had slung on his back. He took out 3 glass jars. Inside were preserved plums. "Oh, this is too much," Carden said. Jars were expensive, and he didn't know how he would get them back to the Johnson family. "Nonsense. It's a gift from my family to yours." "The last of last year's crop, and a good one it was. Put them in a cool, dark place, and they'll stay good another year yet. But do eat them within a week after opening." "Thank you," said Carden, and Tristan and Kier mimicked him. They each took a jar. "Stay for dinner? I have a fine tuna just caught," Carden said. John looked uneasy. "Thank you, sir, but we must be getting back. We have a church function, then home," he said. "Church function?" Carden inquired. "Yes, there's a new sect, the Potentians, and we just joined up. They're actually building the church now, just started. It'll be right at the top of the hill in town." Carden started. The hill had been sacred ground for all the religions. Why was one allowed to build a temple there for itself alone? But he said nothing. "Well then, safe travels home, and thank you for the generous gift," Carden said. "If you ever need something, I feel like our families are now tied by the bonds of friendship." "As do I," John Johnson said, though he seemed a little startled by Carden's words. "I cannot express enough my thanks for saving my son." Carden gave the jar of plums to Tristan, and the 2 boys took the jars to the house. Gwen hadn't even had time to come out and meet the Johnsons. She stepped out of the house as they were pulling away. The plums, some of which they had with their evening meal that night, were delicious. And that's the end of this part. As you can probably tell, it's going to continue on. If you have any comments or questions about this episode or previous episodes, CryptoBiography@gmail.com, or hit us up on Facebook or Twitter. And thanks for listening. Words and music, copyright 2020, CryptoBiography LLC, all rights reserved. Characters and events are fictional, fictionalized, or satirical.